Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. So today I'm going to do a walkthrough of Celestine by iJoe Audio. So he's brought out a bunch of different Macs for Live devices. You can check the Gumroad link in the pinned comment of this video. They're all very reasonably priced. Here I'm looking at the iPad version that just came out, right? Again, you'll find a link and stuff in the pinned comment. This is just $6 on intro price, and the regular price is going to be $10, so can't complain about that. No iPhone version, at least not at the moment. This AU-V3 version will hopefully also run on Mac, but that's not confirmed yet, but the dev does want to do it. He just needs to check a few things, but it's intended that it will be available for Mac. There will be a VST version as well at some point. So the manual says, it lends itself to, let me just flick through a few things here, lends itself to ambient pads, shimmering clouds, stutter harmonics, ghost echoes, celestial clusters. Just turn it up a little bit. Reversed blooms. I love this one. Rhythmic recomposition and evolving harmonic beds. Now, I'll go through this, and there's a couple of things I want to do in this video. One is, I'm going to do a pretty thorough walkthrough. I won't go into every single last detail about the modes, but I will give you enough information to get the general idea of what each of these modes is doing, as well as explain the different knobs. But I think even more importantly, if you look at this session here, I've got a ton of different stuff that I'm going to let you hear it on, and I spent literally all day yesterday making a whole bunch of different presets for all these different inputs that would show off the different modes. And the reason I was able to justify putting that time in is because Ian is sponsoring this video, so thanks a lot to him for that. So let's see a couple of little things first. It's important, let me just turn this up a bit. It's really important to grasp a few little things about this section. So first of all, I'm going to bring spray down. That will stop the playhead jumping around. And I'm just going to bring the mix all the way up. And I'm going to bring down the size, which is the grain length, and the density, the number of grains, right? And I'm just going to switch this to the basic grain mode. Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. I'm just going to check. No effects on. A little bit of dirt, I think we can leave that there. And the reverb at sort of moderate settings, let's leave that like that. Okay. So I'll bring the density down a little bit. So let's look at this section here. So it's currently set to live, and this move knob is set to manual. Right? So that means that the playhead is not moving around, but the buffer will refresh every bar, I think it is. So you can see that buffer changing. So, we will get changes if, this section of each bar has some change, otherwise not, right? Now we can drag here to move that playhead around, and that's the same as manipulating this knob. Right? Or we can also, by the way, here, right, we can use this as an XY pad to adjust playhead and pitch. The pitch, if you see here, it's jumping between 0 semitones and 7. That's because here I've got it set to pitch mode 2, which jumps in values of only fifths or octaves. If I set it to 1, then now if I play here, as I move up, it's going up in semitone increments. And by the way, when I release my finger, it'll jump back to whatever pitch value I've got set on the knob here. But the playhead position will keep whatever was the last position on the x-axis, right? So that's pretty intelligent implementation. Actually, I really like that. So here, by the way, we have input gain and, dry wet mix. This is a really important knob to understand, this move knob. So see, if I turn this on, now this is deactivated because now the position is being determined by whatever we set here. So here at the moment, I've got it set to 4B, that means 4 bars. So it'll take 4 bars to go from the start to the end. So basically it's moving slowly, right? 2 bars, 1 bar, half a bar, right? You get the idea. So the fastest is an 1/8 beat. So I often keep it on 1 bar. Then we also have a reverse option, right? And then we got all these different modes, right? So I'm going to switch off from this example and let's try a little vocal here. So just a little vocal phrase. Let's bring this in. So this is just set to your typical grain mode, right? So spray is a very important knob to understand. Let me just change the move knob. Let me bring this down to manual and let me bring spray down and see now that's just staying there and it's just reading from this position. But if I bring spray up, it will now be able to jump around and play different bits of the buffer, right? So I mean, there's some parts of the buffer with silence, then there will be silence there, right? But also, obviously, increasing grain density is going to make a big difference, and play around with the size and stuff as well. Jitter is a small amount of pitch variation. Spread is very large pitch variation. Stereo width. Now, here this reverb, I've got the decay all the way up, so that's creating a sort of freeze effect. So let me bring that down. So then we can dial in the likelihood of a grain being played back in reverse. So this would be 0 likelihood, 50% likelihood, 100% likelihood. Now if I change this to reverse, then that would mean they'd play forward. Right, so like here we'd have roughly a 75% chance they'd play forward. If I change this so it's now forward, this would now be a 75% chance of reverse. There's a sync mode down here as well, and we'll look at that later in the video. So here I've changed the preset and I dialed this in to something that I thought sounded pretty good on Mosaic. This personally is not a mode that I would probably use much on vocals, but I tried to dial it in kind of okay. So let's just see what this Mosaic mode is. Basically here, each grain will choose an interval, like up a fifth or an octave or whatever, right? Or down and so on. And the types of intervals that will be available will depend on the setting here. So, we have a few different things, like you can see, for example, major. So, that'll have a major third in it. And you can hear that sounds major. And if I change it then to minor here, now it'll have a minor third in it as well as some other intervals, right? So there's a few different options there. So remember, if it's playing things down too much as well, you can play around with the pitch knob. Glide. Again, this one is very experimental on vocals. I wouldn't really use it on that much, but I'll just explain to you what is going on here. So here, every grain will have a start and an end pitch, and then we can dial in, like, is it jumping between those pitches or is it gliding between them? Right? You hear that's a glide more, and then we can also adjust the curve of the glide with this knob. So, I've pitched that all the way down there, right? So let me bring it up here and let me let you hear the glide. Right? So yeah, this not really the sort of thing that you probably would use on vocals much. I love this one here, Reverie. So, I won't go into every little detail about the modes. You can find more information in the manual, but I just give you, the most important information. So here the main thing is that the grains are reverse only, and it's basically going to make things feel soft and sort of dreamy. And we have a wow knob here now, right, instead of spray. Okay. Next, Bloom, definitely one of my favorites. So here, the grains have a delayed start, and there's a little bit of stereo randomization, and basically the result will be, and there's also a bit of detuning, and the result will be like it feels like you've got a kind of after image or some sort of weird little stereo reflection. It's really interesting little mode, this. Next one, Tide. So this is supposed to have some of the sort of feel of waves, crashing in and out on a beach. And here, for example, because this uses an LFO, so here you can control the phase. And then here, this one is pretty interesting, Stars. So in this one, you can't move the playhead manually anymore. And the playhead, it will jump to 5 fixed points in the buffer at like 10%, 30%, 50%, 70%, 90%, right? See there, 90%, right? And then here we have a pattern knob, and that changes the playback pattern. So this one here is some sort of, it's called ping, I think. Yeah, ping. And you can see here, for example, right, that's now reverse, right? And this is forwards, and so on. This slop here is just some kind of humanization. Now, next one. Orbit. This one is pretty interesting. So here you feel like the grains are moving around your head, right, in a circle. One criticism, though, I said to the developer, it's a bit fast, I think, sometimes. It depends on the input and everything. It sounds okay here, but sometimes I felt it sounds really fast. He agrees, and in an update, there's going to be an option to slow this down, so that's great. Lovely, lovely guy, the developer, definitely, by the way. I forget what this radius does. I think it wasn't written maybe in the manual that I saw. But let's just compare that. It's doing some sort of weird pitch stuff. Interesting. Now, let's move on to this synth example. And here I'll talk a bit about this magic section. So that's the dry input there, right? So that was the grain mode, now mosaic. Lovely. These very sort of Boards of Canada. Well, I did a little bit too much, but from time to time. So that's just bringing down the mix amount. This one, I found it quite hard to get something that I liked, to be honest, with this glide mode for this particular input. But I like this reverie one. Bloom. Tide. Stars. Orbit sounding really nice. So let me just put it back to one that's kind of simple sounding. I think this Bloom one. And let's check these magic things. So off, so there's no effect. This is a Juno style chorus. So, you know, we can dial it in. This knob will also, you know, it'll dial in things, even though it's just one knob, it's dialing in other stuff, like, for example, it might do things related to some filtering or speed changes and things like that. You know, it depends, and it doesn't go into detail, at least not in the version of the manual that I saw, about any of that. Wide stereo widening and spatial spread. I love this drift one. This is pitch and time drifts. Listen to that. Very floaty, it's beautiful. This is an octave up shimmer. I think you'll agree there's a hell of a lot packed into this UI, isn't there? And there's a hell of a lot packed in for $6 or even $10, you know, for the intro and regular iPad price. This is a diffusion and smearing. It is a delay. Slow bloom or swell into a larger wash is the way the manual describes this one. Let's just turn that off a second. And then here, wave folding and bit crushing, and again with a mix knob. So, I mean, obviously it would be better to have individual control of all these things. It's just a way to get it all into one UI. But, you know, remember that you can use your own effects after this. Do you know what I mean? I personally don't really care all that much about effects being built in to things. So that's just with the crushing. But that said, actually, I mean, I do really appreciate the effects in this, because some of them, like, you know, like that spread one and stuff, they've really got a unique little sound to them. For sure. Okay, nice. And so here, now, moving on to a guitar example. That's Riffler, by the way, causing that DSP spike. It tends to do that. You know, some apps do. So here I reversed the guitar, but I just want to say, even non-reversed, I mean, it sounds great. And I think it's pretty obvious that this sort of effect will sound good on guitar, right? So here we got grain, echo, and quite a long decay on the reverb. See here, I've set this to reverse, by the way. That's it, running forwards. And move is set to 1 bar. One thing I dislike when knob values are shown underneath the knob. That's fine if you're working with a mouse. It's not good when you're working with a finger like you are on iPad, because when you put your finger there, you can't see the value. So many developers forget that. Listen to this mosaic one on this. I really love this one. It's so unique. So if you remember, this is the one where it's jumping to different intervals depending on the palette. So I think you can hear why I chose this power one, because it's the only one that sounds good on this input. I'll just silently play around with a few knobs here and let you listen. Honestly, with a lot of these, less is more. I almost never use this spread knob. It's not the sort of effect that I like, just crazy, gliding around pitch like that. It doesn't sound very good on most inputs, in my opinion. Okay, so here we're on sync. This is a good chance to talk about sync, maybe. So here, if I put this down to off, now, as long as there's audio under the playhead, we'll get grain playing every 4 times per bar. If I use the multiplier here, then I can change that. Now it's 8 times, 16, and so on, right? 32. And then I can use the density knob. It will basically be a kind of random knob. So here, there's a 50% chance of something playing, but it's all going to be quantized. So this is really important if you're, working especially with percussion and stuff. So I'll let you hear it more in a second when we hear a percussive example. Just remind you, everybody, if you're enjoying this and find it useful and stuff, please smash the like. Cheers. like that one. Now here, just very briefly, a few examples on some more ethereal input vocals. I've got a little compressor here just to smooth things out. You know, there's some parts of this vocal that are very quiet and then it gets a lot louder. So this is the Bloom one. Green. And I like this next one. This was the best one. I mean, here it really sounds like a choir and it sounds like they're singing in rounds, right? Beautiful. Then here, we got a percussion thing, just a little loop. Here, you know, you're not hearing Celestine yet. Let me just bring down the vocal. Although that does sound really nice together, I must say. So here what I did was I used a send, so I'm sending this to bus A, and so I'm receiving here, and I've put a high pass filter on it because I just want to cut out. I want to cut out the kick. So that's one thing. I wish that this did have filtering options for the input. But, you know, you can just use a filter before. It's not really a big deal. But it would be handy, but there's just no room. And there's really no more room in that UI, really. So that's what you just heard is what, you know, Celestine sounds like. So, of course, I've got this up fully wet. There's one thing, at some sizes, this preset browser is really not very nice to use because, you know, it jumps around too much. It's strange, it wasn't like this, you know, the last couple of days when I was playing around with it, I never noticed it acting like this, but today I have. Maybe it's something about the sizing of the window or something. But, whoops, see what I mean? Let me see. Yeah, that's strange, you know, because that was coming up like at times earlier with like, it just wasn't like that. I didn't need to scroll. It was coming up full screen. I think, you know, there was a beta update that I got on, and I think that has done it. But you see, it's an absolute nightmare to scroll through these things. I'm sure that can be fixed because, like I say, it wasn't like that before. But in general, right, I just want to point out, great preset system. So, you know, I can name things, I can choose the bank that I put them into, either the default bank or, you know, you can make folders in your own user bank, and I just made a folder called Kavinsky because I'm going to share these on Patreon. Right here in this dialog, you know, I can create a new bank if I want, right, and just put in the name here and press add and so on. These cancel and save buttons are a little bit small. It looks like something that could be adjusted. I haven't really found it problematic, but it's a little bit small to hit. Then if you tap in here, you know, you have move preset to another bank, delete preset, export current bank, and import preset or bank. I think if I remember, like, because it's been a while since Ian added me to this, I think that I was the one who gave the suggestion to add these things, if I remember right, because so many iOS apps don't have those, and it's so annoying. Especially desktop developers who port stuff, they forget that, you know, all this stuff is a lot more inconvenient on iOS because of the sandboxing, so you really need robust import and export. So you see this, you know, that is the orbit mode, and I think you can hear, you know, the panning there. It's really nice. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I think this is really cool. and very good value, especially at the intro price. I think it'll be a popular release. Thank you for watching, guys. Thanks again to Ian for sponsoring, and thanks a lot to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate you, and thanks to you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy. Cheers.